Hey guys, tonight we're going on a slow, slightly uncomfortable journey into the charming world of medieval daily life, specifically why you probably wouldn't survive even one day of it. Picture this, it's just before dawn, and the rooster is shouting at you again. You stir on your bed of flattened straw, which smells suspiciously like damp feet, and roll over to find a hen staring you dead in the eye. She's in your house, because your house doesn't really have a door, or windows, or privacy, or insulation. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing bedtime check-ins from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're waking up in a 13th century European village, and the good news is you're not dead. The bad news is, well, just about everything else. The walls around you are made of wattle and daub, a charming blend of mud, straw, and let's just say biological adhesives. The floor is dirt, and yes, you sleep right on it. Or at least on a mat that's just slightly cleaner than the chickens roosting near your feet. Your blanket? Probably a scratchy wool sack that smells of both your uncle and the goat he once loaned to a monk. And that goat, by the way, might be sleeping in the corner. Animals often bunk inside to keep warm, or rather, to keep the humans warm. Cozy, right? Until someone steps on a goose. There's no sunrise alarm here. Instead, you're awoken by your own coughing, thanks to the indoor fire that's been smoldering overnight. The chimney is a delightful luxury you do not possess, so the smoke simply lingers in the rafters before drizzling back down like a slow fog of regret. Historians still argue whether these huts were intentionally smoky to deter insects, or whether peasants just got used to never seeing clearly indoors. Now, fully awake, your first task is to unstick yourself from your sweaty tunic. You haven't washed it in, well, ever. Laundry is reserved for special events, like weddings or outbreaks of lice, which are coincidentally the same thing in some villages. You splash a bit of cold well water onto your face, ice cold in fact, and wipe it off with your sleeve, which doesn't help because the sleeve is dirtier than your face. You shuffle toward the doorway, ducking beneath the thatched lintel. It's designed to keep in warmth, but mostly just scalp unsuspecting people over 5'3". Outside, the mist clings to the fields and the smell of manure clings to everything else. Morning chores call because in medieval times, if you don't work, you don't eat. And if you don't eat, you can't work. It's a very encouraging cycle. First up, check on the animals. You try to milk the cow, who appears deeply unimpressed by your existence. The bucket has a hole in it, and the cat knows it. She laps up your spilled efforts while you mutter a few words that, thankfully, no one understands in modern English anymore. Your neighbor Gertrude passes by. She's been up since before dawn making oatcakes, scolding her husband, and mysteriously appearing in 4 different parts of the village simultaneously. She gives you a curt nod and a God's teeth, you look like mold. That's basically a compliment. You wander to the village square where some kind of announcement is being read aloud by the reeve, a man with a booming voice and a haircut that predates the concept of flattery. He declares something about grain taxes, lost goats, and a reminder that bathing in the river on Sundays is still technically frowned upon, not illegal, just frowned upon. The ground beneath your feet squishes a little. It's not rain. Just the combined efforts of livestock, barefoot children, and the sheer indignity of medieval sanitation. You consider going back inside, but you've already done the hardest part of the day, waking up. You breathe in deeply, and yes, that's exactly what you expected. Smoke, manure, cabbage, and a faint waft of despair. Still, there's something almost peaceful about it. Birds chirp in the hedgerows. Someone's baby is crying rhythmically enough to be ambient background noise. A dog barks 3 fields over. You feel the sun rise slowly through the mist, not as a golden beam of hope, but more like a tired candle reluctantly stretching across a canvas of gray sky. And just when you think you might find your stride in this new routine, someone hands you a shovel and says it's your turn to dig the new privy. You nod solemnly. Welcome to medieval life. You've been awake for 37 minutes and you already miss your pillow. You smell like Tuesday. And in the 1300s, that's not just a quirky idiom, it's a lifestyle. See, you've now been up and about for a couple of hours, and it's becoming clear that your presence is not exactly fragrant. But don't worry, neither is anyone else's. Personal hygiene in medieval Europe is a bit like medieval dentistry, rare, painful, and mostly guesswork. Let's talk water. It's there, technically. But people believe, and honestly they're not completely wrong given the plumbing situation, that water spreads disease, especially warm water. Warm water opens your pores, you see, and that's obviously how evil vapors crawl into your soul and give you plague. So instead of bathing regularly, folks might take 1 or 2 proper baths per year. Not per week, not per month, per year. Historians still argue whether the upper classes bathed more frequently or simply changed their scented underlayers and called it progress. Either way, it doesn't help you now. You, dear listener, are wearing the same shirt you slept in, worked in yesterday, and probably got baptized in 15 years ago. It's a linen tunic, off-white naturally, because white doesn't stay white when your washing method involves beating cloth against a rock in a cold stream. It clings where it shouldn't and scratches where it should never. The underarms have a scent best described as emotional damage. Over that, you wear a woolen over-tunic that traps heat, moisture, and regret in equal measure. You belt it all at the waist with a leather cord that's seen better centuries. Shoes? Technically. They're turn shoes, soft-soled leather slippers that feel like walking on wet cardboard and do nothing to protect you from medieval surprises like pig droppings or pointy bits of thatch. You shuffle along in them like a disappointed elf. Now, let's do something wild. Let's brush your teeth. Oh, wait, you can't. Toothbrushes won't be a thing in Europe for a few more centuries. You could chew on a stick, maybe. Or rinse your mouth with wine, which is honestly the most pleasant-sounding option you'll hear tonight. Some people rub their teeth with ash or salt. Others just hope their breath didn't kill the livestock. Meanwhile, your hair is doing its own thing. If you're lucky, it's braided or tied back with a bit of twine. If not, it's crusted to your forehead thanks to last night's stew steam and this morning's smoke. Head coverings are all the rage. Women wear linen wimples. Men sport felt hats or coifs, not for style, but because lice don't like sunlight. And hats mean fewer bugs. Kind of. At some point in this itchy process, you wonder what people did about body odor. The answer? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Perfume existed, but unless you were nobility or a bishop, you weren't spritzing yourself with rosewater. Instead, everyone just smelled like people. People who lived with animals, cooked over open fires, and considered rain a kind of spa day. But still, you do make an effort. You scrub your hands with sand or a bit of lye soap, if you're lucky enough to afford it. It burns, dries your skin, and leaves you smelling faintly of wet barn wood. But at least you tried. A neighbor once used sheep urine as a cleansing tonic. No one talks to him anymore. Now let's visit the communal wash area. There's a trough outside the town where folks beat their clothes with paddles. It's a social event and a mild sport. You bring your shirt there every few weeks, beat it mercilessly, soak it in lye, rinse it in questionably clean water, and dry it by hanging it on a hedge. Congratulations, it is now 6% cleaner and 40% stiffer. And here's a fun fringe tidbit. In some regions, people believe that wearing certain herbs in their armpits, like sage or lavender, would prevent bad smells and ward off demons. It's unclear which was more dangerous. But cleanliness isn't just about vanity, it's also spiritual. The church, which organizes your entire life, whether you like it or not, sees the body as a vessel for sin. Dirty on the outside, dirty on the inside. Monks were sometimes required to bathe as part of penance. And if you're thinking, well, that's good news, you're right, until you learn that penance-worthy bathing happened on average about 4 times a year. Back at your home, read, glorified shed, your bedding is a masterpiece of medieval pest control. The straw is changed seasonally, like actual seasons. Maybe spring, maybe autumn. In between, it houses fleas, mites, and the occasional beetle who has absolutely no intention of paying rent. You fluff it up every few days and hope it doesn't crawl. Still, people do care about appearances. They comb their hair with lice sticks, pluck straight facial hairs with sharp tweezers, and occasionally even trim their nails. But there's no toothpaste, no deodorant, and definitely no razors. Beards grow wild unless you're rich enough to afford a barber surgeon. A man who cuts hair, pulls teeth, and might also amputate your leg with the same tools, probably in that order. As the sun climbs higher, the stink of the village gathers like a musky fog. You can smell the fishmonger long before you see him. The tannery downwind is processing cow hides with fermented dog droppings. Yes, really, and the baker is burning another loaf. You realize something profound. Medieval people didn't notice the smell because they were the smell. But miraculously, you start to adjust. Your nose dulls. Your senses blur. The odor becomes the background hum of the era, like birdsong or distant bells. You too become one with the funk. Now you're clean enough for medieval standards. Not fresh exactly, but not actively offending God. And in this world, that's a win. Breakfast is not the lavish affair you might imagine. No fluffy pancakes, no avocado toast, no foamed milk latte. Instead, you're handed a chunk of yesterday's bread, crust so hard it could double as armor, and a cup of weak ale or watered-down cider. Congratulations, you're officially eating like a peasant. Again. You chew with effort. The bread has texture, possibly gravel. It was made with flour that may or may not have been sifted for bits of stone. Those weren't added intentionally, but they do help wear down your teeth at a rate that would impress even the most devoted sugar addict. By the time you're 30, your molars will look like archaeological ruins. If you're really lucky, say it's a feast day or someone was overly generous, your bread might come with a dab of lard or a smear of soft cheese. No utensils, of course. You eat with your hands, wipe them on your tunic, and carry on. This, my friend, is medieval grab and go. Around you, the village begins to hum with the sounds of work. There's the rhythmic clack of the blacksmith's hammer, the creak of cartwheels over rutted mud, and the soft, panicked squawk of a goose realizing it might be dinner. Everyone has a job, and if you don't, you either marry one fast or become someone else's job, likely in a not-so-fun indentured servant kind of way. Let's assume you're a general laborer. You work the land, maintain fences, help with harvests, and when things get really exciting, you muck out latrines. Every morning you shuffle off to the fields with your fellow villagers, all of whom are equally unbathed and equally sleepy. There's a quiet camaraderie in shared misery and body odor. The tools are basic: wooden spades, iron hoes, maybe an ox if your village is blessed. You dig, weed, plant, and sweat under a sun that cares nothing for your long sleeves or humble aspirations. And here's a fun fringe fact. It's widely believed among some medieval farmers that planting by the phases of the moon could influence crop yields. Historians still argue whether this was superstition or an early form of agricultural science. Mid-morning, someone shouts that it's time for drinking, which does not mean what you think it means. It's the first of several small meals people take to survive the workday. You might get another slice of bread, this one dipped in broth if someone's feeling generous. The broth is basically hot water that once knew a chicken. Maybe a parsnip floated through it once. You sip it from a shared wooden bowl that's seen better decades. Thirsty? Don't even think about the river. You've seen what goes into that river. No, you drink small ale, a low-alcohol beer brewed specifically because water is often contaminated. Even children drink it, which explains a lot about medieval childhood. Fermentation kills bacteria, plus it tastes marginally better than goat milk gone sour, which is your other option. Speaking of goats, let's talk livestock. Animals live with you. Well, it's in your house. Chickens roost in the rafters, pigs root near the hearth, and the family cow, if you're prosperous enough to own one, sleeps just beyond the wooden partition that counts as a bedroom. Why? Because they're expensive, they're warmth in winter, and frankly, you don't trust your neighbors. After drinking, it's back to work. You hoe, sow, and bend until your back is a question mark. There's a kind of rhythm to it, almost meditative. The sky is big, The fields are wide, and your responsibilities are clear. Survive until dusk. In a weird way, it's peaceful, monotonous, almost relaxing. You could fall asleep to this sort of repetition, if not for the dung beetles and aggressive geese. By midday, you get a longer break. Dinner, which means lunch, is slightly more substantial. It might include some pottage, the beloved one-pot wonder of the medieval diet. Made from barley, peas, onions, and whatever else the garden reluctantly gave up, pottage is thick, mushy, and endlessly recycled. Sometimes it simmers for days with new ingredients added as the old ones disappear. It's a kind of edible timeline. You tear your bread into the bowl, soak it like a biscuit, and chew slowly. There's meat in there, maybe. Hard to tell. Could be a turnip with confidence. Protein is rare for peasants. Most animals are too valuable to eat. When you do get meat, it's usually salted, smoked, or boiled beyond recognition. But hey, there's company. You eat sitting on a log next to a friend who has one tooth and endless gossip. Someone mentions that old Walter is sick again. A neighbor swears it's because he saw a comet last week. Historians still debate how seriously medieval people took omens, but suffice it to say, astrology had range. You wash your hands by wiping them on your shirt and return to the fields. Work goes on until the sun begins to dip, and it's time for supper, smaller, colder, and less thrilling than dinner. Leftovers if you're lucky, more bread if not. At least it's something. The average peasant consumes about 3,000 calories a day, just to maintain the non-stop physical effort of being poor. Now, as the village settles down, you notice something strange. Despite everything, the grime, the ache, the hunger, there's a quiet beauty to it all. Smoke curls from chimneys. Someone plays a lyre in the distance, badly. A child laughs. A cow disagrees. And you, covered in dust, sweating out onion breath ale, tired beyond belief, you're still here. Still functioning. Somehow. Still functioning. Somehow. You might not last a lifetime in medieval times. But hey, you made it to bedtime. You trudge back toward the village's work area, shoulders already whispering protest from yesterday's toil. Today marks the official start of your lifelong career, one that doesn't come with a canteen, health plan, or weekend. Welcome to medieval employment, where your resume consists of whatever your birth dictated and your benefit package is limited to a few crusts of stale bread. If you're a serf, your day begins at first light, right after the rooster's encore and the cat's breakfast lap. You owe labor to your lord, which means plowing fields, planting seeds, or mending fences. That's on top of farming your tiny patch of land for your family's survival. There's no punch clock. Instead, you work until the sun is just a warm glow on the horizon, and your back feels like it's composed of 100-year-old oak. Historians still argue whether the average peasant worked 6 days a week or 7. Some records hint at a Sunday off for Mass, but most lords expected plowing, even if you had holy vows. Holiday on Whit Sunday, if you're very lucky. Bad news, holiday means another sermon and possibly another sermon. If you're a blacksmith, your morning smells of coal dust and molten metal. You hammer horseshoes into vaguely hoof-shaped blobs, and your ears ring from the constant clang. Your arms ache by midday, and you secretly envy the serf's back. At least his pain is spread across more muscles. A fringe detail. In some villages, smiths believe that wearing a charmed horseshoe around their neck warded off plague. Whether it actually helped, historians still debate, but now you have something extra heavy swinging against your sternum. Monks, on the other hand, enjoy a schedule of prayer, script copying, and agricultural labor, all before breakfast. They chant the divine office at dawn, scribble Latin texts by candlelight, and weed the gardens by hand. Their career path culminates in more chant, more copying, and perhaps a nice quiet tombstone. Contrary to popular belief, not all monasteries had running water. Some relied on arranged channels from springs. Historians still argue how widespread these ingenious water systems really were. But for you, the difference between fresher and ancient well is all in your imagination. Meanwhile, if you're a baker, your work starts well before dawn. You must coax life out of that stubborn sourdough starter and tend the fire long enough to bake enough loaves for the entire hamlet. The oven's heat bakes bread that's either too hard to slice or too raw to eat. You'll spend the day shaking flour out of your hair and declining offers to share just a little nibble. Fringe rumor, some bakers kept a secret stash of honey to sweeten festival breads. Historians still debate whether that honey was real or just medieval wishful thinking. No matter your trade, ergonomics in this era isn't exactly a priority. You stoop to lift sacks of grain, squat to churn butter, and shoulder awkward tools designed by someone who never strained under their own weight. You'd kill for a padded chair, but all you get is a half-rotted wooden stool that wobbles when you cough. By mid-morning, you notice a dull throb in your lower back that feels like a pair of iron tongs squeezing your spine. You pause and stretch, recalling how just days ago you were blissfully unaware of muscle groups you now name in expletives. You remember Section 2's smoky hut. That same smoke has followed you here, making the air hazy and acrid. Breathing deeply only makes your lungs regret it. A nobleman trots by on a horse so clean it practically gleams. His boots look silkier than your entire outfit, and his leather gloves must have cost more than your annual wages. He glances down, perhaps noticing that you're not moving fast enough. He makes a subtle gesture, an accelerate wave of the hand, and you obey. Slavery it is not, but feudal obligation can feel pretty close. Your lunch break arrives like a mirage. A few bites of cold bread, dipped in rancid olive oil, washed down with ale so tepid it's closer to barley-flavored water. You consider skipping the meal and resting, but hunger and the promise of more pain in the afternoon drive you to eat. You sit against a post, the entire village passing by without so much as a thank you. It's amazing how invisible you become when you're neither noble nor clergy. The afternoon brings varied tasks. You might be building a new millstone platform, repairing thatched roofs, or constructing palisade walls, always supervised by the reeve, a boss with an iron-tipped staff who reminds you that half-finished is as good as never started. In your arms is a basket of bricks, each heavier than the last. You carry them in a line, passing from person to person, until they form walls that will protect the rich folk from the rainy season. Every now and then, someone cracks a joke about modern comforts like beds that don't kill your back or toilets that flush. It's polite laughter, and then the clamor resumes. A shout from the smith signals that your shift at the forge is over, and you pivot to help weld the gate hinge before supper chores begin. By late afternoon, your hands are blackened with soot or blistered from constant friction. You rub them on your tunic. Yes, the same grimy tunic from Section 2, and watch the fabric absorb yet another layer of grime. You realize you haven't felt your fingertips for hours and that you wouldn't trust your sense of touch if you could. If you're a woman bound by guild restrictions, you'll pivot between child-rearing, weaving, and tending the communal oven. Your days are a testament to multitasking, though no one writes songs about spinning wheel calluses or diaper changes with cesspit runoff. But Mary the Weaver's tapestry is somehow the village's finest export, even if she never gets to see a coin for her work. As dusk approaches, the foreman signals the end of the official Labor Day. You're relieved, briefly, before remembering the backlog of chores at home. Trot back to your hut, mind whining. Seriously, you did this yesterday. Your joints snap and crack like rotting timber, and every step requires a pep talk. You find your livestock awaiting dinner. The cow moos impatiently, the goat bleats at 5 different pitches, and the chicken gives you the side-eye for disturbing her nightly nap in your bed. You fill their troughs because feeding animals is another job that never ends, and you glance at the pile of firewood you were meant to chop. Still, you pause for a moment. The sky glows amber, and the workday's final bells echo across the fields. Despite the agony in your muscles and the promise of tomorrow's labor, there's a quiet pride in the structures you helped build, the soil you coaxed to yield, and the community that, in its own ragged way, depends on you. So you may not have chosen this career, and you certainly didn't get vacation days. But here you are, part of a system that, for all its faults, keeps you fed, sheltered, and strangely connected to everyone around you. You might not last a lifetime, but for now, you're doing exactly what centuries of ancestors did before you. As dusk settles and your muscles crave rest, you realize that in this medieval village, privacy is a quaint luxury you'll never know. Imagine whispering a secret, only to have someone 3 cottages down already know the details. In a world without walls, your neighbors learn about your digestive noises, your questionable laundry schedule, and even that awkward dream where you wrestled a boar in your underwear. You trudge toward the communal well to draw water for tomorrow's chores. The path there is narrow, flanked by muddy yards where children chase chickens and grumble about mustard-hued sun. As you lower the bucket into the well, you hear snippets of conversation weaving around you. Did you see how many turnips Edith's carrots yielded? Gerald's new beard looks like hay. They say Owen's going blind from candle wax drippings in the scriptorium. These aren't just tidbits. They're your social currency. If you're not contributing gossip, you're practically invisible. Historians still argue whether the medieval village was more a tapestry of tight-knit community support or a powder keg of rumor-fueled grudges. In your case, it feels like both. You feel your pale, eyes flicking to old Maud, who crouches behind her hut, pressing her ear against the wood. She's been known to eavesdrop on conversations she's not even near. You sip a drop of well water, cold, earthy, and let's be honest, possibly contaminated. And yet, it's the best you've got. Carrying the bucket, you pass by the potter's workshop. Inside, you overhear 2 apprentices murmuring about their master's latest creation, a jug with a handle so large it looks like a small tower. They snicker, saying he must have too much ale on board to think that's practical. Meanwhile, the master himself argues with the reeve about whether to sell his wares at the upcoming market fair. Historians still debate how much creative freedom craftsmen had under feudal restrictions. Were they genuine artisans or mere cogs in the economic machine? Roll your eyes at the idea of lugging massive jugs to a distant market when you can't even manage your own bucket of water. As you approach the village square, the scent of yesterday's ale and today's sweat mingles in a haze that reminds you of Section 2's smoky hut, only amplified. You remember how your nose had to acclimate to the medieval bouquet of odors. Now it's second nature as you wander past the blacksmith's forge. Sparks fly as the blacksmith hammers a horseshoe. Rumors say he's crafting a special shoe for the local Lord's prize stallion. Whether that's true, historians still debate, but the apprentices are betting it's for a secret tournament next week. But betting on gossip is the medieval equivalent of modern sports odds, except here you trade a piglet for a simple prediction. You spot Maud again, this time dangling a bit of thread from her sleeve, a known signal that she wants to share something juicy. You approach, knowing full well that if she has something to say about you, she'll look you dead in the eye and deliver her verdict. Indeed, as soon as you stand beside her, she leans in and whispers, "I heard the reeve's wife has been sneaking to the monastery to learn herbal remedies. They say she's brewing a potion for fertility." You aren't entirely sure whether to laugh or wince. Fertility potions are part of village lore, and some believe these concoctions can truly influence childbearing. Historians still argue whether such herbal remedies had any real effect or were dangerous superstition. The firelight in the blacksmith's forge flickers across Maud's wrinkled face, and you catch the glint of excitement in her eyes. She gives you the look, a combination of triumph and scandal that lets you know this gossip is hot off the press. You nod slowly, playing the part of the intrigued friend, even though your mind is already shifting to the next overheard tidbit. The reeve's wife has always been an astute woman, quietly advising merchants on spice blends and patching together charity for the poor. If she's indeed learning herbalism, perhaps she's seeking a way to alleviate the rampant aches and pains that plague the village, aches you felt firsthand in Section 4 as you lugged bricks until your back begged for mercy. Carrying your well bucket back, you navigate through a cluster of laundry lines draped with garments beating in the breeze. A group of women chat about the best way to wash woolen cloaks. Some swear by steeping them overnight in lye solution, while others claim a half-hour scrub suffices. Historians still argue whether rinsing in river water or collecting morning dew was more effective. You see a dull brown cloak you recognize as belonging to the reeve. The reeve is no stranger to gossip either. Legends say he has 2 secret mistresses, an oft-retold rumor that historians still debate the veracity of. You decide you'll keep an ear out for how that story unfolds. Your feet drag you toward the smithy courtyard where the inn's proprietor, Marigold, is gossiping with travelers from the next shire. You catch half of her conversation. They say that Count Barnard's new castle has walls as thick as a dragon's hide. Whether that's exaggeration or fact, historians still debate how imposing that fortress really is. You squint in their direction, have a fleeting thought about Section 1's thatch-roofed hut, and imagine trading your rickety home for a stone keep, no livestock sleeping under the same roof. A daydream, of course, because you can't fathom working for a count after all you've done for the reeve. Marigold's voice shifts, lowering to a conspiratorial hush, and they say a traveler just arrived with a secret map to a lost Iron Age hoard. You blink. A lost hoard, silver coins, decorative torques, maybe a gem-encrusted goblet. People can't help themselves. Treasure talk runs through the village like wildfire. Will you join a quest? You doubt you have time. Your day job, as detailed in Section 4, dries out every minute of sunlight you possess. Still, you file the rumor away for a rainy day when misfortune might strike your turn shoes and the idea of treasure might pay for a new pair. By evening, you find yourself at the tavern hearth with a stew that's more water than vegetable. The air is thick with the aroma of boiling leeks and the faint notes of spilled mead. You sit with a group. Some serfs, a craftsman, and a traveler who claims to have seen the plague pit on the outskirts of the bishop's domain. You say nothing as he recounts the sight, bodies buried in a mass grave, barely covered with earth. It's gruesome, and yet part of the fabric of life here. Historians still argue how common these mass graves were, and if their locations could have been better documented to prevent future outbreaks. You shiver, not because of the horror, but because the hearth's embers have gone cold and the tavern's roof leaks in a steady drip, drip, drip onto the wooden floor. Someone next to you, a woman whose name you only know as Annie, brings up a topic that makes everyone lean in. Did you hear Father Thomas claims a dragon was spotted east of the forest? He swears its scales shone like polished brass. You turn to look, half expecting a scaled behemoth to stomp through the door, but you see nothing except soot on the walls. Dragons, of course, are the staple of childhood fantasies and nighttime fears. Whether dragons ever existed or if they were simply large monitor lizards misunderstood by medieval eyes, historians still debate. You sip your lukewarm ale, imagining how a dragon sighting might change everything. Lordly men with crossbows, knights in battered armor, and you carving a niche as the village chronicler if you live to tell the tale. The traveler shifts, curling his greasy cloak tighter. They say the bishop paid this man to spread that story as a distraction from the harvest taxes, someone suggests. A low murmur of agreement ripples through the room. Taxation, an endless source of gossip and grievance. You recall the Reeves droning announcement from Section 1 reminding people of their grain dues. Sure enough, tax talk never dies. It's like a medieval social media, except everyone stands around the well instead of scrolling on a device. You lean back, feeling the tension slip from your shoulders as you realize that, in this world, trust is as rare as clean water. Gossip is the glue that bonds the community, sometimes sticky, sometimes toxic, always messy. You might hear news about a distant neighboring village, the arrival of a traveling monk with a contagious book of riddles, or whether the local wife's elixir really cured Gerald's gout. In every whisper, there's power. The power to bind friendships, spark feuds, or change the trajectory of your life. If you're clever, you use gossip as a shield, deflecting blame or gaining favor. A rumor can leave you penniless, banished, or worse, accused of sorcery. As you stand, you gather your empty bowl and your thoughts. Maud is already sneaking away to tell someone else what you just heard. The traveler is leaning in to grill the tavern keeper about the bishop's wealth, and Annie is scribbling the dragon tale onto a scrap of parchment, perhaps destined for the monastery scriptoria. You realize you'll sleep tonight unaware whether any of these rumors are true. That uncertainty, that delicious sense of not knowing, is what keeps you tethered to this village, even as you dread the never-ending cycle of chores and back-breaking work. Your bucket of water waits in the corner tomorrow's battles against thirst and filth. Your family's dwelling stands crooked and dim, a reminder that walls do not keep gossip out. Yet, as you walk back home, the night air feels calm. The scent of damp straw mixes with the faint promise of a star-studded sky. You remember how, in Section 3, you found solace and monotony among the fields. Here, in Section 5, you find a different kind of rhythm, the ebb and flow of whispered secrets, a lifeline that binds the village together. You reach your hut and pause at the threshold. Somewhere inside, the cat is dozing on last night's scraps. A piglet snores by the hearth. The spot where your straw bedding awaits is cool and dim. You set your bucket down and step inside, the whispers of gossip still echoing in your mind. In a place where no one locks their doors, gossip is the closest thing you have to a fortress. It can hurt you or it can protect you. It can unite the village or tear it apart. Tonight, as you lay down, the rumors swirl in your head like motes of dust in a slanted beam of torchlight. You close your eyes and the voices fade to a soft hum, reminding you that in medieval times, what happens in the public square never really stays there. Your wardrobe in medieval times is less runway ready and more runaway from the fleas. Remember that itchy blanket from Section 1? Well, you won't be leaving that behind, you'll be wearing it in layers. Your fashion journey begins with a linen undertunic, a single sheet garment cut from a rectangle of cloth with holes for your head and arms. It's supposed to be gentle on skin, but since you haven't washed it since last festival season, it's more like rubbing sandpaper against. Well, you know. Above that, you don a wool surcoat or tunic that falls to mid-calf, cinched with a leather belt. That belt does double duty. It keeps your layers from slipping and gives you a convenient place to hang your knife, pouch, or thimble if you're a seamstress. The wool is thick, scratchy, and retains every odor you pick up, from smoke in Section 2 to goat cheese from Section 3. Historians still debate whether medieval people considered this an issue or simply accepted that being human meant being aromatic. Buttons, you discover, aren't a thing yet, at least not among peasants. Those are reserved for the nobility, often crafted from bone, metal, or glass beads. You settle for lacing or simple wooden toggles carved by local woodworkers. They press into your flesh in uncomfortable patterns, X's at the back, O's on the sleeves. Fringe tidbit. In some regions, toggles were carved into tiny animal shapes. Rabbits, frogs, even mythical creatures. So you might clench a mouse's head every time you tighten your cuff, a detail historians still argue was common or an eccentric artisan's one-off. For leg protection, you have shows, 2 separate linen hose tied at the waist with more cords. Underneath are your woolen stockings, pitch dark brown from repeated washing in Lion River mud. Each morning, you spend a good 5 minutes wrestling into these tubes because the linen stretches oddly and the ties slip if you even sneeze. A modern-day contortionist would wince. Your footwear, as covered in Section 2, is a pair of turn shoes, thin leather bound at the soles with tiny stitches that fray as soon as you step in wet grass. They mold to your foot like a foot casting, but in a gross way. You might have patches now because replacing shoes is a luxury. In winter, you add extra wool stuffing or even rabbit pelts inside your shoes to stave off frostbite. Historians still debate whether peasants commonly wore shoes year-round or simply went barefoot until the ground froze solid. Accessories are limited. If you're a woman, you wear a wimple and an overkerchief, 2 pieces of linen that wrap your head and neck, leaving only your face exposed. This assembly traps heat and harem mites equally well. If you're a man, you might wear a coif, a snug linen cap, or a simple wool hat. Fringe detail. Traveling merchants sometimes added small bells to their hats for both luck and warning. Nobody likes tripping over a silent stranger on a dark road. Whether that superstition held weight or was charlatanry, historians still argue. Now, let's talk dye. Most villagers wear muted colors, drab tans, muddy greens, and soot grays because bright dyes are expensive and fade with every wash. If you're lucky, you own one good tunic colored with woad blue or madder red, but it's reserved for Sunday Mass or the occasional festival. That tunic carries whispers of envy. Everyone knows you saved barley scraps for a month to afford it. No one says it out loud, but eyes flicker whenever you pass. In colder months, you layer again, a heavier wool coat hardy over your tunic and perhaps a sleeveless surcoat with a deep hood called a chaperone. The chaperone starts as a circular hood that sits like a donut on your shoulders. With slight adjustments, it becomes an improvised hat. The fashionably lumpy silhouette makes you look like a medieval teapot, functional but awkward. Jewelry is scarce. A simple iron or copper brooch holds your cloak if you have one. Women might wear a single bronze or bronze-plated ring, often inscribed with a protective prayer. Historians debate, did these rings ward off illness or were they purely decorative? You suspect decoration because you still feel cold and possibly plague-ridden. Let's talk practicality. There are no pockets. You tie a small leather pouch to your belt called a gypscart that holds coins, herbs, or a bit of bread. That pouch is eyed jealously by pickpockets and children alike. If it's stolen, you're back to begging or haggling with the reeve for another day's work. Linen kerchiefs double as napkins, bandages, and handkerchiefs. If you get a wound, like the one from Section 1's obligatory privy dig, you tear a corner off your shirt to wrap it. You might smear it with honey or wine, both believed to have healing powers. Historians still debate how effective these medieval remedies actually were. As you adjust your belt again, because it's uncomfortably tight, you catch your reflection in a rain-filled puddle. The vision is rustic, tangled hair, dirt-streaked face, and layers upon layers of scratchy cloth. Yet there's a quiet comfort to slipping into familiar fabrics, even if they itch. These clothes tell a story: your place in the village, your economic status, and your readiness for work or war. Finally, consider the fringe practices of personal style. Some villagers braided ribbons into their hair, using leftover strips of dyed wool. Others stitched small fabric charms, little cloth hearts or animal shapes, into their garments for luck. Whether these charms were intended for warding off evil spirits or simply brightening a bleak wardrobe, historians still argue. In a world without storefronts or fast fashion, clothing is about utility, durability, and the occasional splash of pride on holidays. Every layer you wear carries the imprint of Section 3's porch spills, Section 4's brick dust, and Section 5's gossip-laden laundry lines. This lumpy, layered outfit is your daily armor against cold, dirt, and anonymity, and it clings to you, wordless and unwavering, as you trudge onward through medieval life. You're hauling a fresh pile of firewood toward the Lord's Hall when the sun glints off an armored figure descending a small hill. His surcoat bears a heraldic lion, bold enough to make your heart skip. The local lord has arrived, and everything in the village tilts toward his tall boots the moment he appears. You pause mid-step, snap your back upright, and remind yourself that he technically owns the ground you're standing on. As he approaches, the reeve hustles you aside, but not before you catch a whiff of brimstone-scented wool and expensive sandalwood, an olfactory announcement of rank. Lords typically rode out to inspect their domain once a fortnight, ensuring rents were paid, crops were counted, and laborers like you were, shall we say, not underworked. Historians still argue whether these inspections were more about justice or spectacle, but for you, it's an unavoidable performance. You shuffle forward with the other villagers, each clutching a scythe, a sack of grain, or a newborn lamb. The Lord's retinue is a compact parade. A frazzled steward waving a parchment of dues, 2 armored men at arms clicking spurs, and a small child chained to the alley. Just kidding. That practice thankfully ended with the Magna Carta. Historians still debate how strictly the new charter limited feudal exactions, but you're grateful enough to hear no more arbitrary foot tax. The Lord dismounts with surprising grace for someone who's likely eaten better than you for a decade. His horse prances like it knows the world bows at its hooves. You can't help but wonder what it feels like to have a personal transportation device that doesn't squeal when you step on it. The Lord pats the saddlecloth, checking the stirrup leather and the extra-wide reins he insisted be crafted in Paris. Fringe rumors says he once had a gold-eyed falcon for hunting, and that it learned to steal shiny coins from his unsuspecting guests. Whether that's true, historians still argue, but rumor has wings just like falcons do. You bow, which equates to a shallow nod because you have no training in courtly curtsies. Your knees ache from yesterday's privy dig, Section 1, so you keep the gesture simple. The Lord nods back, as if acknowledging that you exist, briefly, like a bookmark in his grand story. He then turns to the steward, who reads off a list: village rent, 6 bushels of wheat, manor labor, 3 days, ale tithes, half a barrel. The words roll off the parchment like an incantation that binds you to another season of toil. The Lord steps forward, boots crunching on well-trodden earth, and inspects your harvest. He pokes at a stack of barley with a dainty cane, an interesting move for someone who mandates everyone else carry full-size tools. Your barley looks adequate, not prize-winning, but not shriveled either. He gives a curt nod. In your case, that means you can keep your best turn shoes intact for another month. Victory. Next, he examines the sheep pen nearby, a clutch of white wool, balls more nervous than you are. You recall Section 3's description of medieval diets, and you inwardly pray that none of these sheep ends up in the stew pot next week. The Lord strokes one sheep's jowly cheek, admires its lustrous fleece, and surreptitiously checks a hidden marking that signifies ownership. Historians still argue whether sheep branding was widespread or confined to border regions, but you've seen more tattoos in a fish market than at court. He straightens and motions to you. "Peasant," he says, voice echoing in the morning hush. "Come forward." Great. You step, trying not to trip on your own laces, air, ties, and approach. He eyes you with curious detachment, like a cat inspecting a slow-moving mouse. "Your tithes are paid on time," he announces. "Your labor has been sufficient." This is medieval praise, as rare as a quiet chicken. You feel a flicker of pride. Keep that in mind for your next chore. Then he does something unexpected. He offers you a small silver coin, shinier than any coin you've ever seen. Your fingers tremble as you accept it, and you mentally calculate how many handfuls of grain that could buy. 5? 10? Enough to barter for a chunk of cheese that doesn't taste like fermented goat? Word of the handout spreads like wildfire. You see eyes widen among the assembly. Receiving a coin from the Lord is both a blessing and a potential trap. Historians still debate whether such gratuities were genuine rewards or subtle debts to be collected later. You tuck the coin into your gypscart pouch, careful not to let it jingle. It feels heavy with expectation, and small enough to slip through a crack in the floorboards if you panic. The sword advances toward the open-sided barn where the millstone awaits inspection. He traces a finger across the stone surface, examining the carved bird motif. He demands artisans produce flawless work, even if the villagers secretly think the design looks more like a blob. You recall Section 4's mention of the master baker's purported honey stash. This lord's artisans are reputed to use crushed beetle shells to create red dye for textiles, a detail historians still argue was widespread or simply a guild secret in far-off Flanders. As the inspection concludes, his stewards tally costs for repairs, roof thatching, fence replacement, and the new privies designated for next month bless his heart. You gulp, recalling Section 1's fragrant memory of chamber pots and shared trenches. Now you'll be digging twice. Your usual chores and this upcoming latrine. Delightful. The Lord mounts his horse again. He tips his gilt-edged helmet in farewell, an extravagant flourish that sends a plume of dust around his boots. Then he's off, retracing his steps down the hill, the retinue following. For a moment, the village breeze is one exhale. You wonder if he noticed the lopsided roof on the charnel house or the missing spike in the chicken coop. Probably not. Lords see what they want to see, and the rest remains your busy work. You stand amid the fields, clutching your half-pound coin, the velvet sky of obligations unfolding before you. Moments earlier, you were one of many. Now, you are momentarily favored. But favor fades as quickly as it arrives. You must decide, spend the coin now to ease today's hunger, or save it for a rainy day when a gutter collapse demands a new thatch repair. Your choice, like every choice in medieval life, is bound by necessity, scarce resources, and unpredictable whims. As you turn back to your shovel, the bucket of barley, and the cackling hens stepping on your toes, you remind yourself of one constant. Regardless of the Lord's fleeting benevolence, tomorrow you will still wake in that straw hut digging, hauling, and bowing to powers both seen and unseen. The silver coin is a bright anomaly in your everyday gray, a temptation and a token, both evidence of your function in this world and a reminder that your worth fluctuates with every nod of the Lord's head. You pocket the coin, shoulder your shovel, and trudge onward. The fields await. The village square awaits. And the endless cycle of duties continues. Tonight, tomorrow, and the next day. You trudge back toward your hut, heart still pounding from the Lord's parade, only to remember that in medieval times, even your love life feels like another compulsory chore. Romance here is less sweeping you off your feet and more tripping over your own feet in muddy shoes. Still, you're determined. After all, everyone needs a hobby besides digging latrines and hauling barley. You spot Eleanor by the well, her linen wimple catching the late afternoon light. You probably know her already. She's the one who sneezed in Section 1's hut and sent a mouse scurrying across your scrunched-up blanket. You gather your courage and hope it doesn't collapse like your turned shoes, and approach, clearing your throat like it's a performance, not just a hack from inhaling too much hay. "Good eve, Eleanor," you say, trying not to sound like a goat bray. She looks up, blush in her cheeks, dusted like a cheap woad stain. You kneel to tie your laces, an oddly modern gesture, though you have no laces, only ties. She raises an eyebrow, amused. You smile and point to her spindle. "I hear your weaving is as fine as the tapestries in the Lord's Hall." Here's a medieval fact. Spinning and weaving were considered essential domestic arts for women, taught from girlhood onward. Your compliment isn't just flattery, it acknowledges the hours she spends bending over thread, turning flax into fabric so intricate it might take a knight's ransom to replace. Historians still argue whether exceptional weavings ever made it beyond the local market into noble courts, but you hope your praise flutters to her heart like a silk ribbon. She laughs softly, then invites you to accompany her as she carries her latest piece to the village dyer. The path takes you past the baker's stall. Section 4's secret honey stash is rumored to sweeten festival breads again soon, and into the open field where wildflowers bow in the breeze. The golden light makes everything look as if it's dipped in mead-colored syrup. Romantic, except for the dung beetle scuttling between blossoms. You step carefully. As you walk, you mention the scholars' debate. Some say love poems were mere recitations at courtly gatherings. Others argue they were genuine expressions of affection. Historians still debate which was the case in peasant villages. Eleanor nods, tucking a loose strand of hair under her wimple. She smiles at your learned remark, either impressed or politely humoring you. Reaching the dye vat, a large wooden tub filled with steaming woad concoction, you inhale the earthy, slightly fishy scent. Fringe knowledge, some dyers added goat urine to fix colors more quickly. It's unclear, and historians still argue, whether this practice was widespread or confined to small artisan enclaves. You wrinkle your nose but stand close enough to hold her shawl strap as she dips her weaving into the swirling blue. Our first romantic mishap arrives courtesy of a stray goose. Yes, the same agricultural mascot from Section 1. It wanders into the field, honking indignantly, flapping wings so close you fear it might peck your eyebrows off. Eleanor jumps back, clutching her weaving, and you nearly stumble into the vat, scattering blue dye like medieval tie-dye wrong. The goose flees, leaving you both splattered. You glance down. Your tunic now sports a cobalt blotch that won't wash out until next wash day, someday. She giggles, a soft melodic sound that makes your heart feel lighter than your usual burdened self. You seize your moment. "If I could weave as well as you, I'd make us matching dyed tunics," you say, voice low. Romance tip, medieval courting often involved giving small handcrafted tokens, rings carved from bone or woven garlands. You reach into your belt pouch and pull out a carved wooden heart, something you secretly carved last week in Section 7's barn inspection, hoping to impress a certain someone. Eleanor's eyes widen as she accepts it. Inside, you slip a quick joke. "I carved it freehand, so it's abstract art." She leans in, and for a moment, you're both bathed in the twilight glow, all goose trauma forgotten. The world shrinks to you and Eleanor, and you almost feel like a regal couple rather than two overworked villagers. Then you realize your stomach is growling again. Romance plus hunger equals awkward. She laughs and offers you a crust of bread she carried for her journey back. You accept it gratefully, nibbling, as you stroll toward the stream to rinse off dye, another callback to Section 2's lye-soaked laundry days. At the stream, you both kneel and dunk your hands in cold water. Eleanor uses a twig to scrape away some of the dye. You help, and your fingers prickle from the chill. Did you know some believe that dipping fabric by moonlight gave a richer hue? You say, pressing a strand of dye-streaked hair behind her ear. Historians still debate whether lunar dyeing was medieval fad or myth. She grins, swishing her locks, and you momentarily imagine you're in a romance epic rather than a budget peasant drama. The water soothes your skin, reminding you of that rare bath scene from Section 2, though this is no holy water. Still, sharing this ritual feels intimate. You catch her gaze and notice she's as breathless as you. You swallow, lean closer, then a fish jumps, splashing you both and sending you yelping. You sputter and laugh, sputtering again when blue water drips off your chin. Nature's version of a kiss, you joke, wiping water from her cheek. She giggles, and the sound slides into the dusk like silk on wood. You walk back to the village under a sky streaked with rose and violet, the evening breeze carrying the scent of jasmine and cooking stew. You exchange gossip updates, the Reeves' wife's potion rumor, Section 5, the traveler's dragon tale, and talk of Count Barnard's imposing walls, Section 5. Each tidbit reinforces the tapestry of community life, now woven with a thread of budding affection. Reaching the tavern door, you decide to seal the evening with a shared ale. You step inside, smelling the smoky hearth and spilled mead. You sit on a bench scarred with centuries of wear, comfortably lumpy like your layered tunic from Section 6. You clink mugs, and your mock toast is to surviving medieval romance without losing an eye. She laughs so hard she nearly tips her mug, and you feel your chest expand with warmth. She muses, perhaps someday we'll host a proper courtship feast, seriously, at least 2 days of ale and mead. Historians still argue how lavish peasant feasts could be. You grin, picturing tables groaning with pork and vat after vat of ale. It's a fantasy as distant as the moon, but tonight it feels possible. The evening wanes, and the tavern's candles gutter low. Your mug is empty, her shawl is damp from dye and water, and your heart is uncharacteristically full. You stand, offering her your arm, as though you've just danced at the manor ball. She accepts with a shy smile. Together, you weave through the darkened lanes, dodging stray chickens and the occasional dog that still mistakes you for its dinner wart. Outside her cottage, you pause. She tips her head under the moon, no wimple needed. She leans in and you feel her breath. You remember that carved wooden heart burning in your pouch. You press it into her palm, whispering, "Keep this until we meet again." Hers is a gentle squeeze in return, and then she slips inside, the door leaving you bathed in lamplight and silence. You walk home on soft stones, the village quiet except for distant snores, goose-free this time. You replay the evening's mishaps, dye spatters, goose honks, jumped fish, and that shared loaf. 3 medieval jokes, 1 carved heart, and a promise that feels bolder than any lord's decree. You return to your straw bed, collapsing into Section 1's familiar scratchy comfort. The wooden heart sits on your chest like a tiny, hopeful weight. Outside, the night breeze rattles the wattle and dog. You drift to sleep with Eleanor's laughter echoing in your dreams, thinking maybe medieval romance isn't solely a chore. It can be, if only for a moment, a tender escape from the daily grind. Night falls, and before you tuck back into your scratchy straw, and yes, that's still the mattress, you face the one chore that turns even the bravest soul pale, answering nature's call in medieval style. Toilets, you discover, are not porcelain thrones with flushing levers, but rather a constellation of chamber pots, garden gutters, and communal trenches that test your ankle stability and dignity in equal measure. You rise from your bed of Section 1 straw, the cool night air flicking goosebumps across your skin. In the corner sits your chamber pot, a simple ceramic bowl crudely glazed to catch what gravity offers up between dawn and dusk. You shuffle over, lift the lid, and wonder if the glaze cracks when it freezes. Some villagers believe that cracking pottery releases evil vapors. Historians still argue whether that's superstition or proto-chemistry, but you'd rather not test the theory. Once you've done your business, a cloth rag hangs nearby for wiping, washed once a season if you're lucky. Most people use leaves, moss, or even sheepskin scraps in the warmer months. Historians still debate whether moss served as a primitive toilet paper or was simply used as emergency padding. You opt for the rag, rinse it in a small pail of water, which you'll dump into the garden later, and replace it on its hook while mentally noting you should wear thicker leggings tomorrow. Sometimes you find the chamber pot overly aromatic, a bouquet of yesterday's stew, today's sweat, and the occasional licorice-flavored gout remedy you tried last month. So once a week, you schlep it outdoors to empty the village's gong, a polite term for the open trench near the communal barn. The gong sloshes with murky poisons, urine, feces, rainwater, and maybe a rat or two. You hold your breath, tip the pot carefully, and hope you don't splash back up onto your boots. Historians still argue if these trenches ran downhill to divert waste away or simply pooled in a convenient low spot for forgetful villagers. On market days or feast occasions, you have another option, the latrine tower at the edge of the Lord's Manor. It's a raised wooden hut with a hole in the floor overhanging the castle's moat or a cesspit. You pay a halfpenny to squat above a drop that leads to a pit filled with layers of straw alone serving as both placeholder and deodorizer. Every month, an enterprising gong farmer ladles out the liquid gold, well, you hope it's mostly liquid, selling it as fertilizer to the richest farms. Fringe fact, some gardens in the Bishop's Orchard thrive thanks to this recycled wealth, though historians still debate if the practice began as common sense or desperate innovation. If you find yourself caught outside without a chamber pot, you rely on natural terrain. A hedge becomes your screen, a ditch at your seat. You squat, hoping no traveler wanders by carrying gossip from Section 5's rumor mill. Then you cover your tracks, shovel leaves over the spot, or toss a handful of dirt on top. This clandestine method feels empowering, but it leaves you paranoid that a neighbor's pig might dig it up. Anyone who's had breakfast interrupted by a foraging pig will swear they remember it forever. But communal facilities are the real social experiments. In some villages, a row of timber seats with circular cutouts is perched on a stone wall overlooking the river. It's less rural retreat and more exposed audience. You sit shoulder to shoulder with your fellow villagers, exchanging jokes, complaints, and gossip while the current carries away your indiscretions. Historians still argue whether these public conveniences were common beyond monastic sites or limited to larger market towns. But if you have one, you use it, because nobody wants to trek to the barn at 2 a.m. Despite the aromas and occasional cold drafts on your back, you learn to adapt. The trick is to bring something entertaining, a scrap of newspaper, well, a handwritten notice or a scrap of vellum tapestry, or if you're lucky, a jingle from the minstrels passing through in Section 5. You murmur a few lines of verse, distract yourself from the chill, and hope a sudden breeze doesn't betray your position to a neighbor taking sunrise water from the well. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some regions, people kept a toilet guardian, a wooden carving of a grotesque head mounted inside the latrine to ward off evil spirits and encourage faster relief. It's unclear whether this was a common practice or a local market stall invention. Historians still debate. You can't help but appreciate the humor, a demon head watching you while you relieve yourself as if privacy needed extra discouragement. Rain complicates everything. A downpour fills chamber pots, overflows trenches, and transforms paths into muddy streams. Your boots sink, and you risk slipping into the very pits you meant to avoid. Once, you slipped, landing squarely in your own discarded solution. The memory still haunts you, like a medieval memoir you never signed up to write. When your family grows, children arrive, each requiring a spot of their own chaos. Your chamber pot traffic triples. You train them early. No throwing toys in the gong, child, you warn. They giggle, a beacon of innocence amid the stink, until they outgrow indoor relief and join you in the trenches, standing on makeshift stools to mimic grown-up posture. Historians still argue whether child-sized seats existed or parents just improvised until the little ones mastered squat-level discretion. Occasionally, the Lord Steward visits to ensure the latrine tower has its monthly cleaning. You spot him inspecting the pit from above, nose wrinkled, quill in hand for tallying progress. His presence reminds you that even waste management is under feudal oversight. There's a paperwork burden for everything. Records note measurements of sludge extracted and payments promised to gong farmers. Historians still debate how accurate these medieval maintenance logs were, but you know they existed because you've seen the overseer's crisp handwriting. Finally, when dawn nears, you chop another small hole near the barn for the next week's chamber pot dumping. It's a grim pottery ritual you perform by lantern light, the flickering flame casting shadows on the upturned earth. You whisper a quick prayer to Saint Swithin, patron saint of rain, hoping your efforts don't wash it all away at the next storm. At last, you return inside, stow your pot, and settle back into your straw mattress. Your legs ache from squatting, your nostrils still twitch from residual scents, and your mind is full of gratitude for modern plumbing. But here, in the hush before dawn, even this chore feels oddly intimate. A private battle fought with everyday materials, a reminder that being human often comes down to the same urgent needs across centuries. You drift back to sleep with that familiarity, a blend of fear, relief, and hope that the chamber pot doesn't spill before morning. And as you sink into Section 1's comforting scratchiness, you realize that the simplest comfort nowadays is not a sheepskin rug, but a flushing loo just a few steps away. You wake early, ache in every limb, and realize today's challenge isn't digging latrines or hauling barley, it's surviving medieval medicine. You stubbed your toe on Section 4's half-rotted stool last night, and now it pulses like a tiny war drum. In the 14th century, that means one thing. You're headed to the healer, which, let's be honest, is just a fancy word for professional blood donor. First, you trudge through the village to the barber surgeon's booth, a half-tattered canopy festooned with dried leeches and a banner depicting a bleeding arm. Barbers and surgeons are two hats, and sometimes axes, worn by the same fellow. He wields a razor on one hip and a bone saw on the other. Historians still argue whether barber surgeons gain more notoriety for neat beards or uneven amputations, but you're trusting him with your toe regardless. You sit on a wooden stool carved with what appears to be a smiling skull, most likely a fringe attempt at gallows humor. The barber surgeon claps his hands, sending dust motes dancing in the glow of a single tallow candle. Bloodletting will cure your troubles, he intones, brandishing a sharp lancet. Mainstream fact, medieval practitioners believed imbalanced humors, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, caused illness. Today, we know your toe doesn't require a hemorrhage, but you keep that opinion to yourself. He ties a strip of linen above your ankle, a cold, constricting noose that feels like Section 2's woolen over tunic squeezing your leg. He jabs your vein and you grit your teeth, partly from pain, partly from realizing his lancet looks suspiciously like a repurposed shoemaking awl. You watch the crimson drip into a pewter bowl, and your mind drifts back to Section 1's smoky hut, wondering if the soot mixing with the blood is a secret antiseptic. As the blood flows, the barber surgeon hums a tune you vaguely recognize from Section 5's Tavern Minstrel, a melody oddly soothing for a self-inflicted wound. You note 3 jokes you'll tell later. You've paid someone to bleed you dry. Literally, you'd rather have plague boils than a single drop more of this healing juice, and next time you'll stub your toe on something softer than medieval splinters. When he's drained what he deems the excess, he slaps a poultice on your toe made of ground mustard seeds and honey. Fringe tidbit, some healers insisted that mixing crushed scorpion with mustard would repel infection. Historians still debate how widespread scorpion mustard was, or whether it's a mistranslation of crushed insects, but you're relieved your poultice doesn't include pincers. Next, he sprinkles herbs, yarrow, plantain, and a hint of rue from a leather pouch hanging at his belt. You inhale the bitterness, a dank aroma reminiscent of Section 6's goat urine dye vats, but strangely invigorating. He mutters vis medicatrix naturi under his breath, the healing power of nature, a phrase that sounds grand until you remember his workshop floor is layered in hair clippings and sawdust. Once the poultice is secured, he instructs you to rest with your foot elevated on a wooden box behind his shop, next to discarded teeth and tarnished scalpels. Godspeed, he says. You hobble out, mindful of Section 9's trench-filled paths, and wonder if resting here counts as bed rest by medieval standards. But wait, there's more. As you're about to head home, a traveling apothecary's cart trundles into the square. He hawks bottled concoctions labeled Panacea Electrice and Dragon's Bane Tincture in ornate copper script. You recall Section 5's traveler claiming a dragon sighting. Maybe this tincture is genuine. Fringe rumor, Dragon's Bane was made from real serpent venom mixed with wine. Historians still argue whether any tinctures contained actual venom or if it was theater for gullible lords. A barmaid offers you a free sample of Sleep Well syrup, to ease the throbbing ache. It's a thick brew of poppy, mandrake root, and what tastes suspiciously like fermented berries. Mainstream fact: opiates were known and used sparingly in medieval medicine, though doses varied wildly. You take a sip, and the world tilts pleasantly, almost as soothing as Section 3's pottage lullaby. Suddenly, a boy trips over your foot, spilling the syrup onto your tunic. You groan, remembering Section 6's cobalt dye fiasco, and watch the dark splotch bloom across your chest. The apothecary huffs and tosses another vial into your belt pouch, complimentary or accidental. Historians still debate whether medieval merchants gave out free samples or if you've just been pickpocketed. By midday, you limp to the healer's hut, a simple wattled frame covered in moss and herbs hanging from the eaves. Inside, a woman with a gentle smile examines your toe through layers of gauze. She's the wise woman of the village, often whispered about as witch, though her spells are merely herbal lore. Mainstream fact: many female healers passed on oral remedies, creating a crucial grassroots medicine tradition. Historians still debate whether witchcraft accusations primarily targeted these women or were broader social persecutions. She unwraps your poultice and presses fresh comfrey onto the wound. The plant's slippery leaves feel like velvet against raw skin. You wince, then sigh in relief as the pain dulls. She speaks softly: keep it clean with rose water and change the dressing thrice daily. Rose water? A luxury you associate with Section 6's rare dyes. She gives you a small vial, which smells faintly sweet, an absurd upgrade from Section 2's lye water. On your way out, you nearly collide with the reeve, who demands to see your poultice. He pokes it, murmurs something about proper healing being a community duty, and strides off, sprinkling anxiety like breadcrumbs. Maybe he's worried about contagion or just curious if you spend his tax money on a costly remedy. Historians still debate how much oversight local officials exercised on medical expenses. But here you are under official scrutiny. Back at home, you follow the wise woman's instructions. You boil water over Section 4's kiln fire, let it cool, then mix in rose petals. The resulting liquid shimmers like dawn dew, if dawn dew smelled like perfume and regret. You gently pour it over your toe, feeling cleansed in a way no well water or sheep urine ever achieved. 3 swishes later, you dab on comfrey and wrap it in a linen cloth, your personal version of Section 2's communal laundry day. As evening descends, you notice the swelling has gone down, a throb, enough to remind you of your humanness, not enough to send you back to the bleeding bowl. You eat a modest supper of salted fish, barley porridge, and a small apple gifted by Eleanor, courtesy of Section 8's budding romance. The combination of sleep-well syrup and ginger in your stew lulls you into a hazy contentment. You settle onto Section 1's straw bedding, foot propped on a wooden chest. Smells of rose water, honey, and a hint of barber surgeon aftershave. An odd but oddly comforting bouquet. You recall the morning's lancet, the afternoon's tincture, and the wise woman's gentle touch. It dawns on you, medieval medicine is a patchwork of crude tools, botanical miracles, and hopeful faith. As you drift toward sleep, you think of tomorrow's chores: digging, hauling, gossiping, and maybe even romance. You promise yourself a day without bleeding, just a steady rhythm of work and whispered rumors. And if your toe aches at dawn, you'll treat it with tincture or rose water, anything but another round with the bleeding bowl. After all, even in medieval times, you deserve a little self-care. To the distant toll of church bells. 4 knocks, a pause, and then 7 more, calling you to the first prayer of the day before the sun crests the horizon. Religion isn't just a part of medieval life. It is medieval life. Every hour, every meal, every grooming ritual is punctuated by an invisible liturgical soundtrack that follows you like a gentle but persistent heartbeat. You trudge outside your hut into the cool dawn air scented with dew, smoke, and the faint tang of incense drifting from the chapel that's bowed beneath cloaks. The reeve's wife, yes, her, the one rumored to brew fertility potions in Section 5, stands clutching a small reliquary shaped like a birdcage. Inside, they claim, lies a fragment of saint. Dustin's thumbnail, thought to heal eye ailments and banish bad dreams. Historians still argue whether such tiny bone fragments truly trace back to saints or simply to industrious forgers, but rumor grants them power all the same. You step forward, kneeling on a mossy stone slab. The stone's cushion of plant life feels cool and damp through your woolen stockings, an oddly pleasant contrast to the scratchy tunic chafing your shoulders. Section 6. The priest's chant fills the morning hush, Latin syllables rolling out like whispered silk. You find the rhythm soothing, almost like the repetitive motion of hoeing fields in Section 3, except here the reward is spiritual rather than subsistence. After the chant, the priest raises a small crucifix and sprinkles holy water into your cupped hands. The droplets tingle like frost, reminding you of the stream rinse from Section 8, but with less goose interference. Chest, shoulders, and rise, feeling both cleansed and oddly weighed down by the day's first obligation. Back at home, you pause to hang your tunic in the sun, saying a quick prayer to your household saint, Saint Fiacre, patron of gardeners and hair-splitting debates. Mainstream fact, medieval households commonly venerated patron saints, leaving little offerings, coins, flowers, bits of leftover porridge at small shrines tucked in their dwellings. Debate whether such domestic shrines were genuinely devotional or functioned more like medieval tchotchke shells. Later, you pass the chapel again as a procession emerges, monks in black robes, nuns in white wimples, and acolytes bearing candles. They chant hymns, and the brass incense thurible swings back and forth, releasing a smoky sweetness that curls around your ankles. You tap your foot to the cadence, literally, and recall Section 9's latrine work. Even that foul chore doesn't repel the ritual. Smells mingle. Holy smoke nestles into the same air that once housed manure fumes in Section 1. It's all part of the same tapestry. Today, you hear the Angelus bell echo across the field, signaling communal prayer 30 minutes apart. You lay down your hoe and cup your hands around your face, shade and prayer in one gesture. You murmur the traditional Hail Mary in your best Latin, your voice catching on dusty consonants. A neighbor glances over, mouthing the words silently, more out of habit than devotion. Historians still argue whether villagers truly believed in the metaphysical efficacy of these prayers or simply followed them because everyone else did. As afternoon drags on, you move inside the chapel to light a votive candle. The chapel smells of melting wax, old wood, and a lingering ghost of last Sunday's sermon on original sin. You press a coin into the offering box and choose a slender taper, blue for protection, red for love, white for general gratitude, and place it near a statue of St. Agnes. They say her relics include a strand of her hair and a fragment of her dress. Fringe tidbit, some villagers believe that if the candle flame dances 3 times, St. Agnes will grant a peaceful dream. If it sputters, you will suffer a restless night. Historians still debate whether these practices were imported from Eastern Christian rites or homegrown superstitions. Exiting the chapel, you pause under the towering belfry where the sexton is climbing rickety ladders to ring the Vespers bell. Its deep toll rolls like gentle thunder across the valley. You feel it in your chest, vibrations like a heartbeat pointing you toward evening prayers and soon supper. Bells dictate your schedule more reliably than the sun ever could. After work, you return home for a quick supper at the sound of the Compline bell. 2 slow chimes, a quick triple, then silence. You nibble dry bread dipped in soft cheese, all while whispering the Nunc Dimittis, a prayer for safe rest. The flavors are bland, yes, but the words give you warmth, almost like the sleep-well syrup from Section 10, minus the opiates. Before bed, you light an oil lamp and gaze upon your tiny domestic shrine, a painted icon of the Virgin, a chipped statue of St. Christopher, and a handful of pebbles collected from the chapel steps. You add a sprig of rosemary as an offering, both for remembrance and for its reputed ability to ward off nightmares. Historians still argue if rosemary use sprang from Roman customs or medieval herb lore, but tonight it lends a piney comfort to your scratchy hut. Even in the darkness, you can't escape the whispers of the chapel choir, recorded in your mind like Section 5's tavern rumors. Every memory from the chanting monks to Maud's gossip to your own whispered prayers weaves into a continuous tapestry of faith, fear, and community. You realize that in medieval times, religion wasn't confined to a building, it flowed through the air, water, and even the soil beneath your feet. As you settle into Section 1 straw bedding, the hush of night amplified by the final toll of the curfew bell, you feel the gentle weight of the day's devotion. The relic of St. Dunstan's thumbnail rests on your windowsill, a small jar of promise against eyesight trouble. You arrange your feet to avoid the cold draft. Section 15's final caution: cross yourself and breathe in the soft incense lingering on your clothes. Despite the unrelenting schedule, the constant bells, and the mix of sacred and profane smells, you find a strange comfort here. Each toll reminds you that you are part of something larger than your back pain or your chores. It's a net woven of belief and routine, holding the village together in shared rhythm. You wake to the patter of raindrops dancing on your thatched roof, an incessant rhythmic drumming that turns your hut's interior into a soaking drum. Medieval times isn't a gentle shower. It's a full-scale spectacle of mud, mildew, and mischief. Today, you learn that in this world, you can dodge two calamities: famine, fire, plague, and wolves, but never all four. Outside, the village's central pathway has transformed into a churned-up ribbon of thick oatmeal sludge. You step out wearing your trusty patch turn shoes, Section 6, only to sink ankle-deep in muck. Each step pulls off a clump of mud like a sticky affection, snapping from the sole with a wet slurp. You wince, recalling Section 9's potty trenches, which now resemble toxic bogs pooling at the field's edge. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers intentionally built trenches to divert rainwater or simply allowed nature to do its worst. Your first obstacle is famine, which sometimes arrives hand in wet glove with rain. If heavy rains drown the barley fields, you'll face weeks of crusty bread and pottage so thin it defies the concept of soup. You recall Section 3's gritty breakfast ale and pray your barley harvest isn't soggy mush this year. Fish bones in the soil before planting to ward off flood damage. Whether that was genuine folklore or barnyard gossip, historians still debate, but you might try it next season, even if you can't stomach more fish in your diet. Next hazard, fire. Ironically, in a soggy village, fire remains the ever-lurking threat. Wood rots faster when wet, so beams and rafters weaken. Lightning strikes the tallest chimneyless roof like a medieval jackpot, igniting sparks into the tinder of thatch. You picture Section 1's smoky hut. Now imagine the smoke replaced by angry orange tongues. Village Bucket Brigade, everyone, including you, forms a line passing buckets from the well, Section 5, each soaked through and heavy as regret. Mainstream fact: bucket brigades were standard fire defense, but their effectiveness varied wildly with water supply. Historians still argue whether organized brigades saved more homes or merely spread panic faster. Then there's plague. Damp, crowded huts with stagnant air become incubators for disease. In 1348, the Black Death rolled through like an uninvited wave, carried by fleas that nested in Section 2's blankets. Wise woman's poultice from Section 10, the one with rosewater and comfrey, and wonder whether any remedy could stand against a miasma born in rain-soaked corners. Fringe belief: some herbalist clipped rue into window sachets to purify the air. Historians still debate if these herbs offered real protection or just a fragrant placebo. Finally, wolves. You might have considered wolves only as fairy tale villains, but in medieval Europe, hungry wolves lurk at the forest's edge, emboldened by slippery prey and easier tracks made muddy by rain. You remember Section 8's romantic stroll to the dye vat? Imagine doing that in a downpour with wolves howling beyond the tree line. Wolves pick off lone travelers before the village watch can muster torches. Mainstream fact: wolf attacks on humans were rare but lethal, fueling legends of werewolves. Historians still argue whether these stories originated from real attacks or cultural fears salted with superstition. So which two will you dodge today? As you trudge to the granary, you glance upward at the sky, a sullen gray slab threatening more downpours. You secure the grain sacks under tarps, hoping to keep famine at bay, for signals that the smith's forge has flared up despite the rain, sparks sputtering like wet fireworks. Fire is next. You sprint toward the forge, mindful of Section 4's descriptions of plodding medieval careers. The blacksmith, who usually hammers horseshoes, now fights embers with a wet blanket. Sparks hiss and curl, sizzling like vengeful serpents meeting water. You grab a bucket from the line and pass it down the chain. Each soaked bucket bulges your fingers. The air smells of burning leather and wet hay, an odd perfume of danger and damp decay. It takes 20 buckets to drown the dying flames, but you succeed. One hazard mitigated. However, as you turn from the forge, you see a new threat, a crack in the granary's roof spilling rain onto precious grain. Famine looms in those dripping heaps. Once again, you sprint, sloshing through ankle-deep mud. You join fellow villagers to bale straw onto the roof, weaving a makeshift thatch barrier against the downpour. Straw is soaked and heavy, slipping through your arms, clinging to your tunic like Section 12's own memory. Historians still argue whether seasonal rethatching was communal work or a feudal obligation strictly enforced by the Lord. By midday, your arms ache and your tunic is saturated enough to wring water like a wet rag. The fire in your muscles is almost as fierce as the one you quelled earlier. You pause, lean against Section 7's inspection barn beam, and take a sip of small ale, Section 3's lifesaver, to steady yourself. The ale tastes of damp grain and the distant tang of oak casks. As you wipe rain from your brow, the reeve clears his throat. He's standing near the sentinel's tower, which by some miracle remains fully intact. He's clutching parchment and a quill, ready to record damage. "We are fortunate," he announces, voice carrying over the range drumroll. "The forge is safe. Our roofs live another day. Let us pray the wolves remain at bay." Wolves, in this weather, might be less active, but they'll return when the sun dries the earth. You nod, grateful to have avoided fire and famine, for now. But plague still hangs in the humid air. You remind yourself of Section 9's trench, recalling that stagnant water breeds mosquitoes and muddy puddles harbor rat burrows. Plague is the stealthy fourth hazard breathing down your neck. Deciding to get ahead of it, you fetch straw from the communal stack to fill low spots around the hut. Straw not only sheds water, but makes the ground less inviting for vermin. You lay thick layers, creating a raised walkway from the door to the barn. It's back-breaking work, but your back aches anyway from earlier toil, Section 4, and at this point, exhaustion is its own shield. By late afternoon, as the rain subsides to a gentle patter, you survey the village. Roofs are patched, granaries tarp holds, the smith's forge lies silent, smoke-free. You breathe a cautious sigh, checking off two hazards, fire and famine. Wolves and plague still linger. You tug your hood over your head. Section 6's layered armor keeps you warm and trudge home. Inside your hut, you bring in fresh straw for your bed. Section 1's seasonal changing, tossing out clumps soaked through since spring. Each new bundle smells of hay and sun, a promise of dryness against tomorrow's moody skies. You sweep the floor with a corn broom, sending dust motes dancing in the lamplight, a ritual against damp rind and disease. You prepare a pot of pottage spiced with garlic and rosemary, an herb rumored to deter evil, Section 11 shrine staple. You stir and taste, noting its warmth in your belly as a small triumph over weather's whims. You sip sleep-well syrup from Section 10 to steady your nerves, better than nothing when plague's ghost lurks outside. As dusk falls, you step outside once more. A lone owl hoots from the church belfry, its call more comforting than the clanging of bells today. You look up at an opening in the clouds, catching the last glimmer of a sunbeam. It's a sign the rain will cease, at least for now. You realize medieval life is a balancing act among these four riders of calamity. You can't outsmart them all, but with grit, gossip, Section 5, and communal sweat, you can survive another day. You tuck your hood and cloak against the moist breeze and walk back to Section 1's straw bed, feeling mud crack beneath your feet with each step. Tonight, you dodge wolves by sleeping inside with the animals, Section 1's snug tactic, and evade plague by airing your hut's walls, cracking open a window to let fresh air in. You've managed to outmaneuver two hazards, and the other two you'll contend with tomorrow. As you settle under your scratchy wool sack, The rain fades to distant whispers, and the promise of dawn's new trials drifts in with the night breeze. You close your eyes, fingers still sticky with pottage residue, and wonder which two you'll outrun tomorrow. Even after rain, the village doesn't drift into silence. When labor ends and chores wind down, you and your neighbors seek amusement, medieval style. Entertainment here isn't binge watching or scrolling, it's raw, participatory, and occasionally absurd. Remember Section 3's pottage monotony? This is the antidote. Riddles, dice, and the occasional rat race. You head to the village green, where a circle of torches flickers around a makeshift stage of wooden planks. The local bard, an earnest fellow named Crispin, tunes his lute with such focus you'd think its strings held the secret to eternal youth. He begins with a ballad about a knight who jousted a dragon and lost his helmet. The melody is simple, the lyrics repetitive. Oh, Sir Roland, did you hear the dragon snort? There's no chorus. You hum along anyway, lulled by the gentle, looping refrain. Historians still argue whether itinerant bards were state-sponsored entertainers or grassroots troubadours eking out a living from tips and ale. Next up is the riddle challenge. Crispin poses, what has roots nobody sees, is taller than trees, up it goes, and yet never grows. You recognize it. Yes, a mountain, because you trudge over one each time you fetch firewood in Section 7. The crowd murmurs answers until old Bridie, the village seamstress, rings a handbell and declares mountain correct. She collects the prize, a small bag of saffron threads, enough to tint a single saffron-dyed handkerchief. Fringe detail, saffron was so valuable that some claimed a thimbleful served as currency. Historians still debate if rural villagers ever saw real saffron or only stories of its price. After riddles, it's time for animal performances, specifically rat tossing. Yes, Section 2's plague carrier critters get a second act here. A cage of tame rats is released toward a target, a suspended bucket painted with a fearful rat face. You pitch your rat, aiming to land it in the bucket without splattering the poor creature. It's hardly humane by modern standards, but the rats seem untroubled, likely trained to hop into containment by accustomed feeding. You chuckle as your rat overshoots, landing on a wooden beam above the audience, squeaking indignantly. Someone shouts, "Second prize," and you grin, accepting a wooden token carved like a rat, intended as a joke among friends. Historians still argue whether animal contests like this were truly leisure activities or disguised rituals to ward off plague by demonstrating control over vermin. Feeling bold, you join the dice game at a long trestle table. The stakes: one loaf of bread, half a wheel of cheese, or a day's exemption from hauling manure. The dice are crude bone cubes, each side pitted unevenly. The host shakes them in a leather pouch, slams it on the table, and you roll 2 6s. Victory dances in your chest. You collect half a cheese wheel. The crowd applauds with the enthusiasm reserved for weddings or harvest festivals. Fringe tidbit: some dice sets bore carved symbols believed to influence luck. Historians still debate if these marks were intentional charms or artisan quirks. Meanwhile, children dart between adults in a spirited game of stick tossing. Each child hurls a wooden stick toward a circle drawn in the dirt. Points are tallied by where the stick lands, inside the circle, on the line, or outside. You watch as little Maud, old Maud's granddaughter, lands 3 perfect tosses in a row. She gleams with pride, clutching her prize, a carved wooden duck, playful and utterly delightful. You remember Section 5's gossip, and realize gossip games differ little from entertainment. Both keep the community engaged and connected. Crispin returns, weaving a funny anecdote about Section 8's stray goose imagining itself a suitor. You laugh because you were there when that goose nearly pecked Eleanor's eyebrows off. He segues into a beetle race, where live dung beetles push little balls of dung across a small track. Spectators cheer for their chosen bug. You place a copper coin on Dungy, the speedy veteran, but to your dismay, Dungy veers off course. You laugh and clink your mug with a friend, reveling in the absurdity. Soon the tavern keeper rings a bell. Time for the trick-taking card club. Cards here aren't paper. They're painted wooden tokens with suits representing wheat sheaves and double-headed axes. You sit down, sketchy on rules, but you follow along. Play a lower axe to cut an opponent's sheaf, win tricks to claim barley tokens. By the end, you've lost 2 barley tokens but gained a hearty laugh when someone mistook an axe for a sheaf and accidentally doubled the stakes. Historians still debate whether medieval peasants actually played card games or if these were introduced by traveling merchants later in the century. As the night deepens, the torchlight softens. People hum tunes from Crispin's earlier ballad, and children nap on laps of exhausted parents. You feel a gentle buzz, comfort, camaraderie, and contentment mingling like mead and honey. You savor the half-wheel of cheese won in the dice game, nibbling slowly while listening to the choir of frogs in the nearby pond, a nature's counterpart to the evening's performances. Finally, Crispin ends the night with a lullaby in his deep, mellow voice. Sleep now, traveler, let your burdens lie. It's enough to make you yawn. You gather your winnings, a wooden rat token, a bit of cheese, and memories of laughter, and head home under a star-studded sky. As you cross the threshold to your hut, you pause. The air is cool, the dew settling on straw and thatch. You place your wooden tokens on a small shelf by the door, symbols of respite from your endless chores. For a few hours, the village set aside toil for delight, proving that even in the toughest times, people find joy. You slip into Section 1 straw bedding, heart still humming with laughter. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, gossip, lord visits, chores, and perhaps more coins from dice. But for tonight, entertainment triumphed over exhaustion. As your eyes close, you imagine Crispin tuning his lute for next week's performance, and you smile. You awaken to a chill breeze slipping through the cracks in your wattle and daub walls, a reminder that even the coziest nights end with cold feet. Today, you'll confront your perpetual exhaustion, that bone-deep weariness born of endless labor, scarce rest, and zero coffee. Rising from your straw bedding, Section 1, you feel every protest in your joints. Your back crackles like old timber, and your shoulders ache from Section 4's brick hauling and Section 12's thatch patching. You stretch once, too, if you're ambitious, only to realize that medieval ergonomics is about as advanced as a rock on your spine. There are no padded chairs or ergonomic tools, there's only the next task. So, you pull on your layered tunics, Section 6, and ready yourself for another sunlit stretch of chores. Your first stop is the granary, where the reeve has summoned laborers to sort the past season's barley. You stand at a long table, sifting chaff from grain by hand, finger after finger, brushing against rough husks. It's repetitive enough to lull you toward a meditative state, if not for Section 10's lingering toe throb, keeping you alert. A neighbor humming a hymn punctuates each scoop, and you think of Section 11's chapel chanting. The rhythm is identical. Scoop, sort, hum, repeat. Mid-morning, you transition to carrying water barrels to the dye vats, completing Section 8's romantic scene with a practical chore that leaves your arms quivering. Each barrel weighs more than a bundle of firewood, and your hands slip on wet wood, signaling a deeper fatigue that no amount of sleep-well syrup Section 10 can mask. Historians still debate whether medieval laborers recognized chronic exhaustion as a medical condition or simply labeled it living. By noon, you've already clocked more hours of manual work than a modern laborer does in a day, and you're only halfway through. You stop for a scant meal, cold pottage and stale bread, meant to fuel your limbs for the afternoon's tasks. You chew mechanically, savoring neither flavor nor texture, recalling Section 3's gritty breakfast and Section 12's rain-soaked fields. Hunger is an ever-present companion that dulls pain only slightly. After lunch, you assist the blacksmith with lifting bellows. Each push of the handle feels like you're pumping the world's heaviest bellows just to keep a few sparks alive. Your arms tremble, sweat beads on your brow, and you pause to lean against a workbench. The blacksmith offers you a sip of ale, which you accept gratefully, feeling the cold liquid slide down and momentarily distract your limbs from their mutiny. Yet coffee, warm, bitter coffee that stimulates mind and body, remains a medieval fantasy. Instead, you have herbal infusions or the occasional swig of mead. Neither truly combats fatigue, they blur the margins between wakefulness and dreams. You remember that rat race from Section 13. You trade a dozen rat tokens for a single cup of coffee. The afternoon sun slants low as you switch roles again. It's time to help mend the village fence. You wield a mallet and straighten planks, each strike resonating up your arm like a vengeful echo. Your vision blurs at the edges, and you catch yourself spacing out, your mind drifting to Section 5's gossip, Section 7's lordly inspections, and that carved heart from Section 8. Memories float by like autumn leaves, each a relic of harder days. Caught in a reverie, you nearly miss the Reeves call, finish up. You snap back, secure the last plank, and wipe sawdust from your eyes. You're back in the present, achy, breathless, but still standing. You realize fatigue in medieval times isn't just physical. It seeps into the bones of your community. Everyone shuffles through the same haze, supporting each other with nods, shared ale, and brief bursts of teasing humor. As dusk approaches, you join the village lantern procession, carrying a lamp toward the chapel for evening vespers. The gentle sway of the lantern light soothes you, like Section 11's candle ritual, but on a grander scale. The flame flickers in time with your heartbeat, guiding you toward twilight's end and brief reprieve. After prayers, you gather with a few friends by the hearth, Section 13's laughter still echoing in your mind. Tonight's story is about a traveler who slept so soundly he rolled out of his bed and woke in a pigsty. You chuckle despite yourself, the warmth in your chest outweighing the soreness in your limbs. Finally, you return home. Each step toward your hut feels heavier, as if gravity doubled for those who've toiled too long. You dump a bucket of fresh straw onto your mattress, fluffing the bed you first met in Section 1, and slide beneath Section 2's scratchy covers. The night air is cool, tinged with lavender from your dried herb sachets, Section 2's nod to personal care. Lying there, you feel every ache, every tired muscle, and yet you find comfort in knowing that tomorrow, the cycle begins anew, and you'll rise to meet it. Fatigue is your constant shadow, but it's one shared by every soul in the village, a silent bond that unites you more than any feast or sermon ever could. You close your eyes, surrendering to the weariness. The world outside quiets, and your breath matches the gentle hum of the night breeze. You've faced exhaustion 1,000 times, and you'll do it 1,000 more. But for now, you yield to the pull of sleep, knowing that in the morning you'll wake again to work, to gossip, to survival. You slip through the low doorway of your hut, just as the last embers of dusk fade into night, carrying a small bundle of fresh straw under one arm. The cool air brushes your face, a reminder that even the most soot-darkened walls can't fully block the world outside. You kneel beside your bed of Section 1's familiar straw and unwrap the bundle, laying it gently atop the ragged mattress. Each stalk crackles under your fingers, a soothing contrast to the damp, flattened clumps you removed earlier. A pig snorts in the corner, its warm bulk curled next to a half-rotten basket of vegetable scraps. You remember Section 9's chamber pots and communal trenches, yet here, the pig's rumbling snores feel more reassuring than any porcelain fixture. You settle into your burlap sack, a coarse, scratchy comfort that feels like a protective cocoon. Historians still argue whether burlap bedding was used beyond the poorest ranks, or if peasants fashioned more elaborate tick-filled mattresses from wool. Either way, you're proud of today's fresh straw upgrade. Above you, a narrow gap between thatch and timber admits a slender moonbeam that dances across your tunic. You tug the woolen overtunic from Section 6 tighter around your shoulders, feeling the layers settle like a heavy shawl against drafty walls. A cold gust whispers through a crack. You tuck your knees toward your chest and breathe in the earthy scent of damp straw, smoke residue from Section 1's hearth, and a faint whiff of rosewater from Section 10's healing ritual. Outside, the wind shifts, rattling shutters you don't have. You recall Section 12's 4 hazards. You managed to dodge famine and fire today, but wolves still roam the dark woods beyond the fence. A distant howl drifts faintly, like an echo of Section 8's rogue goose, but more sinister. You press a hand against the wooden beam, feeling its grain rough against your palm. You whisper a private goodnight to the pig and to the pig sleep pillow you fashioned from Section 1's repeat bedding rotations. Your gaze travels to the small hearth, where a dying ember glows like a single golden eye. Smoke coils lazily toward a missing chimney, Section 1's cozy nuisance repeats. You close your eyes, picturing the ember's slow drift, and let your breath match its pulse. In, out, in, out. You recall Section 11's chapel prayers, the chime of bells marking each hour. Now the hour is silence, save for the pig's snore and the wind's whisper. It's strangely melodic, a lullaby of rural life. A sudden creak overhead, probably a loose thatch, startles you, but you remind yourself your roof kept out rain today. You survived. You pat the burlap next to you. It's empty, but your mind fills it with memories, the Lord's fleeting coin from Section 7, Eleanor's laughter in Section 8, Crispin's rat race from Section 13. Each memory is a small comfort, a spark against the cold. You feel the slight draft on your ankles and shift to cover them with your tunic. Even in winter, medieval huts rarely sealed every crack. Historians still debate whether villagers used wax or animal fat to fill gaps, or simply accepted nightly drafts as part of living. You choose acceptance, tucking deeper into your layers. A low grunt comes from outside, likely a neighbor's cow, rounding up to deliver milk at dawn. You wonder if you'll be awakened by that or Section 1's relentless rooster. Either way, you'll rise, carry water, shovel dung, and obey the cycle. Work, gossip, worship, survive. But not now. You close your eyes and recite 3 gentle jokes in your mind: the barber surgeon's skull smile stool, Section 10, the rat whose bucket aim rivaled your own, Section 13, and the rogue goose that nearly redecorated Eleanor's spindle, Section 8. Each joke is a warm ember, warding off chill and dread. You smile, feeling eyes grow heavy. A final thought drifts in: tomorrow's dawn will bring new tasks, fresh rumors from Section 5, and perhaps another gift from the Lord or another demand. But tonight, you rest. You cradle the pig beside you, breathing in its warm snuffle. You sense the life around you, its rhythms, its trials, its quiet humor. You whisper into the darkness, "Good night, world." Night deepens in soft, sweeping strokes. The wind's breath fades to a gentle murmur, lulling your senses with a tender hush. You sink into the burlap layers, each coarse thread enveloping you like a promise that tomorrow will begin anew. Outside, the pig's rhythmic snoring becomes a calming heartbeat, telling you that life, messy, unpredictable, stubborn, persists in the smallest corners of existence. In this suspended moment, all urgency dissolves. The tasks of section days, digging, hauling, weaving stories, settle into the margins of your mind, muted by the night's soft veil. You feel the weight of wool, linen, and leather cocooning you, as if the very fabrics embroidered themselves into a final, comforting embrace. A flicker from the dying hearth rediscovers you, casting playful shadows that stretch across the walls. Shapes morph into gentle giants of straw and wood, guardians of slumber. You imagine them standing watch, warding off prowling wolves and creeping drafts with silent vigilance. Your breath deepens, rhythm syncing with ancient lullabies carried on church bells that no longer toll. The memory of sacred chants, once marking every hour, now exists only as a distant echo, giving way to an inner calm. You sense the wisdom of seasons past, that humans have always sought rest beneath shaky roofs and thin walls, trusting the pulse of night to forge resilience for dawn. Allow the day's grit to dissolve. Let the echoes of gossip, the clang of forge and plow, the laughter of children, and the Lord's stern nod dissolve into softness. Every ache in your limbs can rest now. Every worry loosens its grip. Here, in the hush, sleep arrives not as a thief, but as a gentle friend, guiding you toward dreams untouched by toil. You drift, cradled by the world's oldest rhythms, heart, wind, straw, and snore, until dawn's first light. The cock crows, but you don't move, not just yet. Your limbs are heavy with the kind of fatigue that doesn't come from poor sleep, but from a life lived at half past hunger and just shy of rest. The roof didn't cave in, the pig didn't roll onto you, and your straw mattress didn't burst into flame. All in all, a good night. But that doesn't make getting up any easier. You stretch, yawn, and your joints protest like an old gate hinge. The hearth has gone cold, the embers long since curled into ash. Shuffle barefoot to the pile of firewood, which is less a pile and more an arrangement of hopeful twigs. Remember Section 4's fire laws? You didn't technically break any, but this morning you're pretty sure the local official would fine you just for looking at a matchstick. You crouch and blow gently into the ashes, hoping to coax even a flicker back to life. Nothing. Just a gray puff of smoke and a soot mustache. You sigh and grab the flint, fingers numb as you strike again and again. Finally, a reluctant spark, a few licks of flame. Victory. You're already sweating from effort, and it's not even breakfast. Speaking of which, you reach for the bread. It's yesterday's crust, now hard enough to double as a roof tile. You soften it in a bit of watered ale. Remember Section 5's clean water woes? A smart peasant learns not to trust anything that doesn't bubble or brew. The bread soaks up just enough liquid to become chewy instead of lethal. It's not delicious, but it's familiar. Outdoors, the village stirs slowly. The blacksmith's hammer rings faintly. A dog barks at nothing, and someone is already yelling about a missing goat. You open your door, really just a creaky plank on hinges you fixed with twine, and squint into the sun. Another bright morning to serve your lord, your field, and your fate. You shuffle toward the center of the village. There's a notice posted, parchment nailed to a plank. You can't read it, of course, but the pictures are clear enough. Something about taxes, probably. Or maybe it's another warning about wolves. Or worse, a traveling bishop. The last time one came through, he took half the village's dried apples and called it a tithe. A crowd's gathered, mostly gossiping. Eleanor is there, spinning wool and whispering to Maud. You catch the words new steward and fines for fence repair. Classic. Historians still argue whether stewards were just efficient middlemen or lords in miniature, enjoying all the tyranny with none of the titles. Either way, you keep your head down. Today, you've been assigned to help Thatcher John's team fix a roof across the village. Not your house, someone else's. Probably someone with a chicken coop big enough to need locks. You trudge across the uneven path, dodging dung and puddles until you reach the cottage in question. John greets you with a toothy grin and an armful of reeds. "Hope you're not scared of heights," he says, then laughs when you don't answer. Heights? Not really. Falling to your death onto someone's turnip patch? Slightly, but up the ladder you go. Thatched roofs are deceptively clever. Layers of water-resistant reeds bound tightly, angled just right to send rain sliding off into the mud rather than your bedding. You learn the proper pattern, overlapping bundles and tying them down with twine made from old flax. The reeds itch. The twine snaps. You get a splinter under your fingernail that makes you curse like a monk who stubbed his toe during Lent. But after an hour or two, you fall into a rhythm. Toss, press, tie. The wind at this height smells of hay, chimney soot, and faraway herbs. You can see the entire village from here. Smoke drifting from chimneys, chickens wandering like they own the place, children poking a frog with a stick. It's oddly peaceful. "Careful there," John calls, as you nearly drop a bundle on his foot. "Roof will collapse faster if you rush it." He's not wrong. Thatched roofs need proper maintenance. Historians still debate whether they were fire traps or marvels of medieval engineering. You're inclined to believe both. At midday, you descend for lunch. It's more stale bread, but someone's brought leeks and boiled them in ale, which counts as luxury cuisine these days. You share a bowl, sitting on the edge of a low wall that's seen better centuries. You joke about starting a roofing guild. John says only if it comes with free beer. You laugh, coughing on a leak string. After lunch, it's back up again. The sun beats down harder now, and the reeds scratch your arms, but the work is satisfying. You've fixed something, created shelter, made a piece of life a little less drafty. As dusk nears, the roof is finished. You climb down, aching but proud. The family thanks you with a nod and a hunk of soft cheese. Real cheese. Not goat sour or mold-bitten. You savor it slowly, each bite a reward. You wander back home as the sky turns lavender. Smoke rises again from your hearth. Someone lit it for you. Probably Eleanor. Or maybe the pig. You'll never know. Inside, the pig's already snoring. You ease into your straw, the memory of the rooftop still in your limbs. You smell like thatch and sun, a good smell. You feel useful, not just tolerated by the system, but necessary, even if only for one roof, one day. The fire crackles gently. You pick a stray reed from your sleeve and twirl it. You could have been born a serf, a thief, a nun's helper, a beggar outside the abbey gates. But here now, you're just a tired peasant, full of leaks and a sense of purpose. Outside, someone sings a lullaby in Breton. It floats over the rooftops like smoke, curling under doors, wrapping the village in song. You close your eyes and smile. Tomorrow brings more labor, more notices, more absurd chores like counting sheepdog. But tonight, you sleep with a full belly, a sound roof, and a pig that didn't bite you. That's enough. You wake, once again, before the rooster, not because you're rested, but because the hay poke lodged in your shoulder has announced itself with all the subtlety of a marching band. You roll onto your back with a groan, only to discover that the pig has stolen your blanket sometime in the night. Again, the hearth has gone cold, predictably. Your flint is nearly worn to a nub, and your fingers are stiff from yesterday's roof work. Still, you coax the fire into existence, muttering encouragement like it's a small, smoky toddler. It answers with a reluctant flicker. You warm your hands. The day begins. Today's task is one you've been dreading, a trip into the local town. Your village might feel like the center of your tiny universe, but once a month or so, you must brave the bustling maze of muddy streets, marketplace brawls, and high expectations to trade, pay taxes, or in this case, fetch nails and a replacement cooking pot. Yours finally gave up after too many stews and a suspicious incident involving a stone you'd mistaken for a turnip. You set off just after dawn with a cloth bag, a few carefully guarded coins sewn into your hem, and a wary glance at the sky. It smells like rain. It always smells like rain. Your boots squelch in the mud as you pass the mill, nod at old Hilda spinning flax, and then cross the rickety bridge that separates home from here be taxes. The road is long, mostly uphill, and mostly unkind. You pass other peasants headed the same direction, some with baskets of eggs, others leading skinny goats, all of them looking equally thrilled to be participating in this communal migration. A cart rumbles past, its wheels clattering like bones in a bucket, pulled by a mule with more attitude than muscle. You reach the town gates by mid-morning, where a guard eyes you with professional suspicion. He grunts at your bag, but you're waved through. Too poor to rob, probably. Inside, it's chaos. The market square is a sea of smells, roasting chestnuts, fish left too long in the sun, fresh bread, sweaty humanity. You dodge a cluster of geese, owned by someone with zero regard for peace, and find yourself immediately overwhelmed. There's shouting, arguing, and one man loudly trying to sell miracle eel oil that cures boils, blindness, and presumably bad breath. You keep walking. Your first stop is the smithy. The blacksmith is an impressive figure. Forearms like tree trunks, eyes half lost in a cloud of soot, voice like gravel in a sack. You show him your cracked pot. He snorts, flips it, and offers you a new one with a dent that adds character. You hand over 2 of your precious coins, feeling the sharp sting of commerce. Then come the nails, which are kept in an oiled cloth sack and measured not by weight, but by how many he can grab in one go. It's not scientific, but it's the system. You take what you're given. After that, it's time for a brief, and by brief, we mean mandatory. Stop at the tax collector's stall. A thin man with an even thinner mustache counts out your dues with the glee of a cat pawing a trapped mouse. You offer your last coin. He counts it slowly, too slowly. You're short, he says, despite the math. For road maintenance, he adds, motioning to a pothole nearby large enough to store a goat. You argue. He tuts. You offer the dented pot as collateral. He agrees, mostly because he likes the look of it for reasons he doesn't explain. You walk away poorer puddles and feeling like you've just traded your dignity for 3 rusty nails. Lunch in town isn't an option. You couldn't afford it even before that encounter. You nibble on a bit of dried apple from your pocket and try not to inhale too deeply near the tanner's stall. Whatever's happening to that cowhide should probably be reported to a priest. You spend a few minutes wandering, partly to delay the return journey and partly to enjoy the rare exposure to things like options. There are stalls selling fabrics dyed with beetroot and walnut, jewelry made of glass beads, and even a scribe penning letters for those rich enough to have distant lovers or taxes due in Latin. You stop near a puppet show where children scream delightedly as a man in a wimple tries to wrestle a wooden devil off stage. You laugh quietly. It feels odd to laugh without consequence, but the moment passes quickly. As you begin to trudge back, your bag lighter but your steps no less weary, you consider how alien this place always feels. The town is louder, brighter, more dangerous, but also more alive? Historians still debate whether medieval peasants found town life exciting or terrifying. You're leaning toward both. You pass a beggar mumbling to herself near the gate. Her teeth are gone and her eyes dart like a bird's. You hand her the last of your dried apple. She accepts it without meeting your eyes. Just another reminder, one bad harvest, one futile spat, one fall from a ladder, and that could be you. The road home is lonelier. The others have taken different routes or are still haggling over goat cheese. You hum a tune to yourself, something your mother used to sing. The wind picks it up and carries it down the path ahead of you, like a message to your future self. Keep going. Keep going. Not much farther now. By the time you see your village again, the sun is already beginning to tip its hat toward the horizon. You arrive home, sore, coinless, and still thinking about that pot. The pig snorts in greeting, unimpressed by your journey. You sit slowly near the fire. It's not roaring, but it's still warm. You hang your damp cloak to dry and rub your hands together. The nails, at least, made it back. Tomorrow, you'll help fix the fence behind the garden. It's leaning like a drunk monk after a festival. As your eyes close, your dreams fill not with dragons or kings, but with puppets, geese, and a tax collector wearing your cooking pot like a crown. Strange, you think, but somehow familiar.